Aquaman and Black Panther. Both of these characters share several similarities in the comics, and in this versus video, we are going to see if the same can be said with their movies. It's Atlantis versus the surface world. It's time to compare Aquaman with Black Panther. Let the battle commence. The story for these movies and their respective comic books are very similar. Both the heroes return home to take their rightful place on the throne, all the whilst they have to go up against an angry family member who, for family-related reasons, wants to take the throne for themselves and run things their way, as well as wage a war on the rest of humanity. And hence, we have our story. Both the good and bad guys have their supporters, and they fight a war for the throne. Now, as much as these stories have several similarities, the executions are very different. The first one is pacing. You soon realize that there is a blatantly apparent formula to Aquaman, and that is exposition, storytelling, character interactions, and then action. And this happens a lot throughout the movie, and it was fine the first time it did it was even fine the second time. But when it happened the third time, you start to wish the movie would have revised the way in which it paced itself. Because as much as I really enjoyed the action scenes, the way in which they were being paced out was becoming a routine. And looking back, it could have been conveyed more smoothly in the overall narrative. Not to mention that when we were being given exposition as to who Aquaman is and what his place in Atlantis was, it felt very exposition heavy. In Black Panther, however, the explanations of the world and how it works was very clear and did not come off as heavy exposition, and it naturally went from character development to cultural scenes and then to action. And as a result, this made its story a lot more seamless. Not to mention the pacing was much more streamlined too. Now, a big part of the story for these movies also comes down to the politics in which these two worlds operate, and how they did something which caused the death of someone important. Wakanda operated in one way and Atlantis operated in another, and when our heroes find out, it's a revelation which hits them emotionally. In Black Panther, we already know what it is. Black Panther finds out that his father killed his own brother and left his young nephew alone, which made him grow up to be the vengeful killmonger we all know. And this part of the story was very effective, and it really had a massive impact on the overall story. In Aquaman, the revelation that our hero and our main villain gets is also very deep and powerful. But that being said, as good as it was in Aquaman, I felt more of an emotional reaction to the revelation in Black Panther. And that's because this revelation goes hand in hand so perfectly with Killmonger's development and story arc. So as much as I like the story in both movies, Black Panther relayed the politics of its world and told its story better than Aquaman. If Aquaman found a more natural and less exposition-heavy method of telling its story, then things would have been different. But seeing as it didn't, the movie with the superior execution of its story is Black Panther. So as I said, both of these heroes have very similar stories. Interestingly though, when it comes to personalities, they are absolutely nothing alike. Black Panther is very humble, quiet, and smart, whereas Aquaman is the complete opposite. In spite of all that, he still has a clear head when it comes to the difference between right and wrong, and at the same time, he doesn't make the perfect choices that other heroes will usually make, and that's what makes him interesting and likable. He makes decisions based on both logic and emotions, and this is perfectly illustrated in the first fight scene where he goes up against Black Manta and his father. And with regards to his personality, Jason Momoa is a ton of fun as Arthur Curry. He has a tough, yet very upbeat charisma about him which is very infectious. So much so that most of the time he was on screen, I had a smile on my face. And he demonstrates a stern personality when he needs to as well. And you also feel for him. In the first half of the movie, he puts up a good fight, but he mostly gets his butt kicked. And there was a point during one of his battles where he loses something very valuable to him, and it was a genuinely sad moment. So I thought James Wan and Jason Momoa did a great job with Aquaman. Is he my favourite rendition of the superhero? No. He is my second favourite. My first favourite was the one from the fantastic Justice League animated series. People always talk about Aquaman from the Super Friends cartoon, but they never talk about the one from the Justice League. And I don't know why they ignore it. This was the first time Aquaman was taken seriously.
These are my final terms. Refuse them at your own risk.
But your demands are outrageous. They would compromise our entire world defense and economy.
Your problem, not mine.
He also cut off his own hand to save his baby, for crying out loud. And yet, on talk shows like Conan, they completely ignore it and talk about the Super Friends version as if that was the only version that existed. But yeah, this is my favourite Aquaman. Jason Momoa does a great job, but his version of the character is less of a serious and morally strict badass and a bit too laid back. Now with Black Panther, whenever he's involved in an action scene or is interacting with the side characters, he's cool, but as an actual character, I always found him to be kind of dull. His motivations are great, as is his realization of his ancestors' incorrect ways, but I always attributed that to the strengths of the storytelling because even though I thoroughly enjoyed it, once the scene was over, I still couldn't bring myself to think he was a great character. I have seen the Black Panther movie twice now, and both times I have found myself more interested in the side characters and especially the villain. On his own, Black Panther is an average superhero to me. Without Wakanda, without his team of people, he just isn't the same. I definitely appreciated him a lot more when he was part of a bigger team, hence I really enjoyed seeing him in Civil War and Infinity War. But in his own movie, I just wasn't really that interested in him. He even gets a fake death scene. I don't know why the first movie of an intended franchise tries to fool us into thinking that the title character is dead, even though we know they aren't. I mean, even Venom did this recently, so this just makes it one of the many times where Marvel kill one of their characters and then bring them back to life. And after he inevitably comes back in Avengers Endgame, he can then join Loki and Nick Fury as the most resurrected character in the MCU. So, the superhero I unquestionably enjoyed the most out of the two with regards to their characters and their journey to becoming the king is Aquaman. Now the side characters in Aquaman are played with a great cast, but I found most of them to be walking exposition a bit too often. Now they aren't completely devoid of human emotion like the side characters in Man of Steel, but when I think back to the movie, I mostly remember them talking about what Aquaman must do. Now they certainly do have their natural character moments, but I wish there were more. Another side character is Mira, played by Amber Heard, and I thought I wasn't going to like her acting judging by the trailer, but even she did a surprisingly good job. The jokes between the two are also very funny and easily the best humour of the film, and in general, the jokes in Aquaman were very well done. Even the ones that didn't fully work still got a smile out of me, and even at their worst, there was never a point where the humour became cringeworthy. As for Black Panther side characters, I thought their purpose and relationship with our main hero was very well illustrated. Okoye showcases very firmly that her responsibilities are to protect the king regardless of who it is. M'Baku has different political views, so he separates himself from the rest of the people, but that doesn't mean he is a complete and total stiff. He still showcases some compassion and actually helps Black Panther by keeping him in a state of hibernation after he was thrown off the waterfall, as well as providing a stupid joke which ruined a genuinely good and uplifting scene.
Are you done? Are you done?
Probably the most bubbly and likable side character is Black Panther's younger sister. Sure, she can tell some crap jokes, but she is the smartest one of the group and creates all of the gadgets, technology, and nurses the talking white guy back to health. Oh yeah, speaking of which, we even get American Watson back from Civil War, and I like how he and Black Panther are continuing their communication and business relationship from Civil War with Zemo, and oh, Stan Lee.
I think I'll just take these, bring them over here, and hold on for safekeeping.
I can never watch these cameos the same way anymore. They almost take on a completely different meaning now. Probably the side character that had the most potential but wasn't given enough screen time was Forrest Whitaker as Zuri. The character's relationship to Black Panther was being built up very well, but when he died, I thought it was too soon, and as a result, I wasn't fully attached to the character on an emotional level, so when he dies, I personally didn't care when it happened. So he could have been my favourite side character, but unfortunately, I personally wasn't given enough time to acquire an emotional connection to him. But his role in the story definitely played a very important part. So, of the two movies, which one had the better side characters? Well, they both get the job done, however, I found the side characters to be a bit more interesting in Black Panther. And strangely enough, I was more entertained by them, and I also found myself caring for them more than I did the main hero of this movie. That was by far the biggest shock for me coming out of this film. Now both movies have not one, but two villains. In Aquaman we have Ocean Master and Black Manta, and in Black Panther we have Killmonger and Claw. Now in Aquaman, Ocean Master is the main villain, whereas Black Manta is the secondary villain. And not only do they both get a great amount of screen time, but they also have understandable motivations, and in Ocean Master's case, it's a surprisingly sympathetic one. Now Black Manta simply wants to kill Aquaman as he didn't save his father, so for him, he is given a classic comic book revenge story. And I would expect more if this was the primary villain, but seeing as he is the secondary villain, I am more than willing to accept it. It's a classic comic book villain motivation, and I kind of miss miss those. Now Claw's main motivation to be in this movie is for money. Killmonger has told him about vibranium and how much it's worth, so he tags along, not knowing that Killmonger has other plans for him. And Claw is a ton of fun in this. I love the weaponized prosthetic hand he has, and was immediately disappointed when it was taken off. I was also quite disappointed that he wasn't given more screen time and was killed off quite early on. He might get overly goofy in a scene or two, but watching Andy Serkis as himself for once and not as a CGI character, there's something oddly special about that. But as far as his motivations go, he is just a common thief. So as far as the secondary villains go, I much prefer Black Panther, as his motivation has originated from a place of loss rather than greed. Even though you don't care about his loss, seeing as he cares when his family gets killed, but he doesn't care when he kills other people's families, leaving them in a very similar emotional state that he himself is in. And it's this contradiction in these villains' mentality which makes them all the more putrid and unlikable. So you have this constant hatred towards them, and that is one of the makings of a great villain. So, now it's time to talk about both of these films' primary villains. We'll start with Ocean Master. For those of you that have read the comics, you will know that Ocean Master is Aquaman's half-brother. The two have never met each other, and in Ocean Master's case, he doesn't care if he meets his brother. Now in the comics and animated movie, I found his resentment towards Aquaman understandable, but there wasn't enough motivation backing it in my eyes, and that made it feel a little generic. This movie, however, gives him an extra reason to hate Aquaman and the surface dwellers, and that is the death of his mother. A lot of reviewers out there are dismissing Ocean Master as a typical cliched villain due to his desire to declare war on humanity, and that's most likely because they either missed or completely ignored this very important detail. Their mother's death is why Ocean Master has such a strong hatred towards his brother, as his very existence is the reason Atlantis killed her. Add to that the fact that the surface world constantly pollute their oceans, kill the sea creatures, and also played a part in having his mother get killed, it all adds up and gives him a reason for taking such destructive and drastic measures. And much like Killmonger, you don't agree with his solution, but you understand what got him there. So I thought his motivation was excellent, and it gave him a more rich character than what we had in the comics and even that animated film. And this is further illustrated when he and Aquaman both talk on a personal level. Aquaman talks about always wanting to meet his little brother, and Ocean Master gives a few personal exchanges too, and I really like the tragic relationship that these two have with each other. It's a tragedy because if the circumstances of their family history was different, then these two could have been on the best of terms with one another, but unfortunately, they aren't. I just wish there was more of it. That's my only problem. This relationship would have benefited from being a little more fleshed out. That being said, they did stick to the roots of the character whilst enhancing his story with some additional storytelling, and he does something in the end which made him a lot deeper in my eyes. So, in comparison, what did I think of Killmonger? Well, first off, I loved his introduction scene. He opens with some exposition and preaching, but it is something we are not told very often. So this gives us a history lesson which is very historically accurate and real, as opposed to what we are told now in this world where feminists and SJWs try to change history. So I really commend this movie for its political and historical honesty in this regard. And he is so determined in his goals that he even kills his girlfriend right after he compassionately reassures her that she's gonna be okay. And his motivation for doing all this is that the previous Black Panther killed his father and didn't bring him back to Wakanda, leaving him with his dead father. And as he was growing up as an orphan, he had witnessed a lot of death, and Wakanda did nothing with their resources to help those in need. And in that time, you can imagine how much anger Killmonger had built as he was growing up. So when he decides to wage war, you don't agree with him, but you understand how someone with his emotional mindset got there. And that not only makes him a sympathetic villain, but the first legitimately good Marvel villain. That is the main reason I went to see this movie in the cinema. Otherwise, I would have waited for this movie to come out on Blu-ray. And not to mention, he doesn't even tell a single stupid and immature Marvel joke. Whenever Marvel give their villains jokes, they don't know when to stop. So until they learn to show restraint, I think they should not have their villains joke around. Because then instead of getting villains like Killmonger and Thanos, we get Ultron. And in his final moments, Killmonger is shown all of Wakanda like his father had promised him, and it was a very nice scene. So overall, both villains are motivated for personal reasons as well as the animosity they have for their family. Now I have constantly gone back and forth between these two, and I would really like to call this round a tie, as the motivation for both of the main villains makes perfect sense. But if I had to give the slight edge to one of these villains, then I would have to go with Ocean Master. Now, I was initially going to choose Killmonger, but the reason I went with Ocean Master is because of the unexpected emotional ending they gave his character. After building up all this rage towards his big brother and the surface world, something is revealed to him which changes everything he believes in, and the look in his eyes summed up his emotions perfectly. There was no dialogue, nothing. Just a look, and that look he gave hit an emotional note with me, and it was the perfect close to his arc. So both of these are great villains, but Ocean Master felt like he was given a complete arc by the end of the film, and it was filled with more heart and emotion, and that is something I did not feel as strongly at the end of Killmonger's arc. I still love the character of Killmonger, and he and Thanos are my favourite Marvel villains. That being said, the movie with the superior villains is Aquaman. Now, the special effects in both of these movies serve the same purpose in that they are heavily used in order to create a world. Now, Black Panther is able to use several practical locations, whereas Aquaman has no choice. It always has to utilize CGI. Practical effects in real locations are used whenever they are on land, but anytime the world of Atlantis is shown, there is no other way it can be done. It has to be CGI. So, what did I think of the CGI in both of these movies? We'll start with Black Panther. The best way I can describe the CGI for this movie is that in concept it's great, but its execution is very fake, and other times it's downright terrible. It's clear that the best special effects team Marvel has were working on Avengers Infinity War at the time, and the C team were left to work on Black Panther. The best effects are when we see views of Wakanda, but even then, when the characters are shown in the shot, it's clear that they are really in a studio with a green screen. And not only that, this is the first movie that gave me serious Star Wars prequel vibes. The CG already looked dated when the film came out, and as the years go on, it's just going to look worse. So this is one of those Marvel movies that visually won't hold up over time. The story definitely will, but the visuals won't. And like I said, the effects aren't bad all the time, but come on, even this looks like something that was made in After Effects. Also, really, this joke was done in Lego Batman years ago. I know you often have trouble with incorporating humor, Marvel, but if you want to include a joke, then for the love of God, stop making them so juvenile. Anyway, despite the fact that most of the effects are clearly fake, they can still look really nice at times. So, how do the effects compare in Aquaman? Well, I was expecting the effects in this movie, specifically with Atlantis, to be on the same scale as Wakanda. Little did I know, this is not on the same level of Wakanda. Not even close. It's on the level of frickin' Avatar. I am not kidding. The underwater ocean makes Wakanda seem so insignificant and small in comparison. Atlantis is just so large and rich with visuals. You'll need to watch most of the underwater scenes several times in order to see all the details and creatures, as there is often tons of stuff going on in the background as well as the foreground. And it never looks like a mess. It looks like a populated city, which is exactly what Atlantis is supposed to be. So I cannot commend the special effects enough with regards to world building. This really is the best I've seen since Avatar. And that's just the underwater city. There is also great attention to detail on the characters when they are underwater. When the actors are filming this movie, they are really on a set and being dragged around on wires. When they are integrated into the movie, however, they float around and actually sound like they are underwater. Their hair is constantly flowing back, and there is a sound filter that is applied to their voices. It's subtle but very effective, and a detail most would not even think or even bother to include. The special effects are beautifully crafted, very effective, and perfectly showcase the aggressive nature of these sea creatures. There are times when the green screen work is a little more obvious, but for the most part, the visuals and creatures in this film are phenomenal, and the artistic use of colors is a feast for the eyes. Every shot looks like it has been planned out to the T and merged together with top-notch cinematography. There's a ton of new stuff going on with the visuals that I have never seen in a movie before. Filmmakers usually stay away from basing films mostly underwater, and when you see the amount of work and craftsmanship that went into this movie, I can see why. But James Wan took the challenge on and really delivered. Really, I cannot commend the visuals of this film enough, and I honestly didn't see that coming. I was expecting the visuals to be good, maybe even great, but I did not expect them to be phenomenal, and it's no competition. The movie with the superior special effects, without a shadow of a doubt, is Aquaman. Alright, it's time to talk about the action. The first thing I noticed with the opening action scene in Black Panther is how he moves. I love his athletic ability that he constantly uses to fight, and I also like how his suit absorbs the damage he receives and is able to fire it back at his enemies. And from a filmmaking point of view, I like that there was some blood in the fights. The MCU have been against including more than a few drops of blood, but Black Panther, to my knowledge, is the first to incorporate more of it. And it increases the stakes and makes the fights seem more real. I always thought when Iron Man gave Captain America those last few heavy punches in Civil War that he should have spit out some blood, but he didn't, and I always noticed that when I watched this fight. It's a small detail that would have tremendously benefited this scene. Black Panther, however, does include that bloody detail, and it really makes the moment all the more worrying. Now, it's important to note that blood is not in all of the action scenes, but when it is used, it's very effective. So, what did I think of the action itself? Well, I think the action in this movie is good, but none of it is great. Well, all except the car chase. Everything else was just par of the course. Even the war in Wakanda I thought was very conventional and lacked any creativity. And it doesn't help that we've now seen a much better war in Wakanda in Avengers Infinity War. It kind of makes the action in this war seem much cheaper and far more kid-friendly in comparison. The reason they are fighting is still high grade, and that is down to the great storytelling, but the action itself is just mediocre at best. Even the main fight in the climax was uninteresting. The best thing about it was listening to Killmonger and Black Panther's conversation, and that's not good. In a fight scene such as this, both the dialogue and the action is supposed to work in conjunction with each other, but instead they just go and have an incredibly lame and fake fight. So yeah, I was very disappointed with the action in this, and there was one scene in particular that really bothered me.
Wakanda forever.
Here's a little advice for you PG-13 movies out there. If you can't show someone getting their throat slit, then do it creatively where we don't see the aftermath of the person's dry neck, or just have them get stabbed in the back of the chest or something. If you can't handle it, then don't show it. For example, when Black Manta stabbed the captain at the beginning of the movie, it was a clear and visible stab in the chest with the blade coming out of his back, and it was far more effective. And this segues us into the action for Aquaman. Now, I really didn't know what to expect with the action in this film. If you were to ask me what kind of action can you do in an Aquaman film when he's in the ocean or on land, I wouldn't be able to give you an answer. Even if you were to take my thoughts and project them on the wall, I still wouldn't be able to comprehend a great action scene with this hero. That's what makes me all the more amazed that James Wan did not only craft action that was good for Aquaman, but he also managed to pull off some of the best action I have ever seen in a comic book movie. The only trailer I had seen for this movie was the first one. I ignored the rest because I heard they were very spoiler heavy, and I'm glad I didn't see them because the action constantly surprised me with how creative it was. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw so much CGI in an action scene that felt so right. I think the last time I saw something that was this amazing was again in Avatar, but that's with regards to the ocean battles. The land battles were even better. On land, there is more realism with regards to how things are shot, as James Wan utilized more practical effects with real explosions and stunt performers, and these scenes were breathtaking. I can't remember the last time I had such an adrenaline rush. Now, you get your typical sharks and dolphins, but there are so much other fictional sea creatures, and the designs for all of them are so creative. And we even see the trench, and these things are downright scary. James Wan is a well-renowned horror director, and just the way he has them show up feels like it's something taken directly out of a horror movie. I honestly wish we could have spent more time with them because that scene was so creepy and intense and violent. Aquaman and Mera used some dirty tactics to kill them, and the music in this particular scene was composed by Joseph Bishara, who did the music for all of James Wan's previous horror films, so that was a very nice detail that made the scene even better. Also, when Aquaman starts to take control of the sea creatures, it really is an amazing sight to behold, and it is so rewarding, especially when he brings them to the huge war in the film's climax. The rest of the music for this film is also very good, especially during the action scenes, and it definitely brings an additional weight and scale to the already fantastic visuals. Every single shot of action has so much thought and effort behind it. You can really see so much detail, creativity, and such a passionate effort in all of these scenes that I honestly dropped my jaw several times. I mean, I have never seen action like this, and those are the land battles. Even the underwater battles are so fresh and new, and all the colors and stuff that was going on, it It truly is a sight to behold, and a lot of the reason it's great is not just because of the creativity, but also because of the direction. A lot of James Wan's directing traits are in this movie. If you have seen his previous work, such as the first two Insidious films, The Conjuring 1 and 2, and Fast and Furious 7, you will know that James Wan includes a couple of continuous shots, and in every movie he uses them, they get better and better. And honestly, I think he has reached the peak of his craft here, as there are so much action scenes in Aquaman that have nice long shots. And we have seen one-shot action scenes before, but this film has one-shot action scenes that really are an exhilarating experience, and they are paced so perfectly. I can't remember seeing action this fast-paced and well choreographed since the Russo brothers, and I would never say that lightly, as you know how much I love their action scenes. Really, the action is one of my most favourite things about this movie, and I would put it right up there with my favourite action scenes in all of comic book films. And when compared to Black Panther, the war in Aquaman seems much bigger in scope. I was not exaggerating when I compared it to Avatar, because that's what was going through my head when I was watching the underwater action scenes. And from a budget point of view, it downright astounds me that Aquaman is able to visually look so much better than Black Panther, and is also able to pull off these grand action scenes on a budget of $160 million, as opposed to Black Panther's $200 million. Seriously, where did all the money go? It has less special effects to incorporate, and even the ones it does still have several obvious flaws. Simply put, the action in Aquaman is breathtaking, and definitely should be seen in the biggest and loudest screen possible. Otherwise, you will be missing out. I'm sure you have all seen this coming by now. The action in Aquaman is far superior to the mostly lackluster action in Black Panther. So, in conclusion, the story for Black Panther is better executed, but where Aquaman doesn't succeed in the story, it more than makes up for with the experience. The lush and beautiful underwater world, Aquaman's journey, Ocean Master's motivation, Black Manta's revenge story, and some of the best action I've seen in a long time. Even the cinematography is amazing. There is not a single shot in this movie that feels half-arsed or lazy. Not to mention that the first time I watched this movie, the exposition-heavy dialogue bothered me, and although I still saw it as a problem, I was able to tolerate it more in my second viewing. Both movies also have great soundtracks, but what I found interesting about Aquaman's soundtrack is that several of the characters have their own theme. Aquaman has his own theme, so does his mother, Mera, Black Manta, and even Ocean Master, and they are used several times during the movie, and they are so distinct and full of energy. Black Panther has a great soundtrack as well. My favourite is the Wakanda theme. It fits the movie so well, and by far is the most memorable theme of the film. Although I did like it much better in Aquaman, because the style of music in Black Panther is more subtle, whereas in Aquaman they went for the more grand and epic style to go with the equally grand and epic visuals and action. So I like both of these movies for different reasons, and that is going to be reflected in the scores, which might surprise you. Black Panther gets an 8 out of 10, and Aquaman gets an 8 out of 10 as well. Despite the films having the same score, I did prefer Aquaman, and that is mainly down to the fact that as the film goes on, it is non-stop showing you so much new stuff with regards to scale, action sequences, and a unique family feud which has a different and deeper conclusion. Some reviewers say that Aquaman is light with a social commentary, but when you get down to it, all comics have their own level of depth to their messages. Black Panther has a more heavy political message, but Aquaman still has a very relevant environmental one, which is not being conveyed in film, and it should. Does Black Panther have a better story? Yes, but I have seen the film twice now, and I feel like that's enough. I don't need to watch the movie anymore. I watched Aquaman the second time, however, and as soon as it was over, I wanted to watch it again. This is definitely an experience movie, and it took my breath away so many times, and I am actually saddened that once it's off the cinema screen, I'll only be able to see it on my TV screen. This is actually one of those movies that I'm going to make an exception and not watch until I am able to get a projector, because this is meant to be seen on a massive screen. And the character of Aquaman and the amazing world that James Wan has created really brought a newfound energy to this film, one that I have never experienced in a comic book film before, and I love it. And the big reveal that we get when Arthur Curry actually becomes Aquaman, it was beautifully done. Also, something I noticed during Black Manta's introduction scene is that it had the nuns wailing sound from The Conjuring 2. James Wan said that he had put a Conjuring reference in the movie, so I assume that must have been it. So yeah, the movie that wins this battle is Aquaman. The sheer scope of this movie is so gigantic, and even though it's a bit light on story, when you factor in the huge visuals, the excellent action, and the motivations for the villains, and especially Ocean Master's mourning of his mother's death, it results in a movie that feels epic. And I very rarely use that word. Either way, both of these are very good comic book movies, and I cannot recommend them highly enough. So, that's it for another Versus video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to comment below and share your thoughts on these two movies, as I would be very interested in hearing your opinions. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell to ensure you stay up to date with my future videos. Thank you very much as always for watching, guys, and I will catch all of you next time. Take care.